The Epic Journey, Joseph, Moses, and the Exodus. Welcome to the epic journey that unfolds as we explore the remarkable tales of Joseph, Moses, and the awe-inspiring Exodus. Prepare to be swept away by a story that unveils ancient wonders and unparalleled courage. Our story begins with Joseph, a dreamer who faced unimaginable trials. His brothers, consumed by jealousy, sold him into slavery, launching Joseph on a path that would lead to power and redemption. Gifted with the ability to interpret dreams, Joseph found himself serving as Pharaoh's advisor. Famine struck the land, and Joseph's wisdom saved Egypt, forever altering the course of history. Centuries passed, and the descendants of Joseph found themselves enslaved. Amidst their suffering, a new hero emerged, Moses. Chosen by God, he would become their deliverer. In a moment of divine encounter, Moses was called upon to free his people. Unleashing 10 miraculous plagues, he defied Pharaoh's resistance, proving that faith could triumph over power. As the Hebrews journeyed towards freedom, their path seemed blocked by the mighty Red Sea. But with unwavering faith, Moses stretched out his hand, and the waters parted, creating a passage to their salvation. In the wilderness, Moses received the 10 Commandments, divine laws that would guide the Hebrews through the trials and tribulations of their newfound freedom. The story of Joseph. Joseph was the 11th son of Jacob and the first son of Rachel, Jacob's beloved wife. He was born in the land of Canaan, and from a young age, he stood out among his brothers due to his exceptional qualities and the favoritism shown to him by his father. Joseph's brothers became jealous of him because of his special status and the coat of many colors that Jacob had given him. Joseph's troubles deepened when he began having dreams that seemed to predict his future greatness and the bowing down of his brothers to him. He shared these dreams with his family, which further fueled their resentment. One day, Joseph's brothers decided to take drastic action. When Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers who were tending the flocks far from home, they seized the opportunity. They stripped Joseph of his coat and threw him into a pit. Initially, they planned to kill him but eventually sold him to a group of traders who were passing by. These traders took Joseph to Egypt, where he was sold as a slave to an Egyptian named Potiphar. In Egypt, Joseph's fortunes began to change. He proved himself to be a capable and trustworthy servant, and Potiphar promoted him to oversee his household. However, Joseph's newfound success led to trouble when Potiphar's wife falsely accused him of attempted rape. As a result, Joseph was thrown into prison. Even in prison, Joseph's talents shone through. He interpreted the dreams of fellow prisoners, which eventually reached Pharaoh's ears. Pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt, was troubled by 2 disturbing dreams and sought someone who could explain their meaning. Joseph was called upon to interpret these dreams, and he revealed that Egypt would experience 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. Impressed by Joseph's wisdom, Pharaoh appointed him as the governor of Egypt, second in command only to Pharaoh himself. Joseph's administrative skills allowed Egypt to prepare for the coming famine by storing grain during the years of plenty. When the famine arrived, it affected not only Egypt but also the surrounding regions, including Canaan, Joseph's homeland. Joseph's brothers, unaware that he was still alive and unaware of his rise to power, traveled to Egypt seeking food during the famine. They appeared before Joseph, who recognized them but did not reveal his identity immediately. Instead, he tested his brothers and eventually disclosed who he was. Overwhelmed with guilt and remorse for their earlier actions, the brothers were reconciled with Joseph, and he forgave them. Joseph invited his father Jacob and the rest of his family to Egypt, where they settled in the fertile land of Goshen. Joseph's wisdom, forgiveness, and leadership helped his family survive the famine and thrive in their new home. He lived a long and prosperous life in Egypt, playing a significant role in the preservation of his family and many others during the famine. The story of Moses. The story of Moses is one of the most well-known in the Bible. It begins with the birth of Moses during a time when the Israelites were enslaved in Egypt. The Pharaoh of Egypt had ordered the killing of all Israelite baby boys due to a fear of their growing population. To save her son, Moses' mother placed him in a basket and set it afloat on the Nile River. Miraculously, the basket was discovered by Pharaoh's daughter, who took pity on the infant and adopted him as her own. Moses grew up in the royal court of Egypt, enjoying all the privileges of an Egyptian prince. As a young man, Moses witnessed the harsh treatment of his fellow Israelites by the Egyptians. One day, he saw an Egyptian beating an Israelite slave, and in a fit of anger, Moses killed the Egyptian. Fearing for his life, Moses fled into the wilderness of Midian, where he encountered a group of Midianite shepherds and helped them water their flocks. Moses eventually married one of the shepherds' daughters, Zipporah. While tending his father-in-law's flock on Mount Horeb, Moses had a life-altering encounter with God in the form of a burning bush. God called Moses to return to Egypt and lead the Israelites out of slavery. Moses was reluctant at first but ultimately accepted the divine mission. Moses and his brother Aaron confronted Pharaoh with God's demand to let the Israelites go. Pharaoh, however, refused and, in response, God unleashed a series of 10 plagues upon Egypt, including the famous plagues of blood, frogs, and locusts. After each plague, Pharaoh initially agreed to release the Israelites but then changed his mind. Finally, after the 10th plague, which saw the death of all firstborn sons in Egypt, including Pharaoh's own son, Pharaoh relented and allowed the Israelites to leave. Moses led the Israelites on their journey out of Egypt, through the Red Sea, and into the wilderness. During their time in the wilderness, Moses received the 10 Commandments from God on Mount Sinai. He also guided the Israelites through various challenges and hardships. However, the people often complained and rebelled against Moses and God. Moses' leadership continued for 40 years as the Israelites wandered in the wilderness. He never entered the Promised Land himself due to an incident where he struck a rock to provide water for the people instead of speaking to it, as God had commanded. As a result, God allowed Moses to see the Promised Land from a distance before he died. Before his death, Moses passed on his leadership to Joshua, who would lead the Israelites into the Promised Land. Moses died on Mount Nebo, and God buried him in an undisclosed location. He left behind a legacy of faith, leadership, and the foundation of Israelite law, making him one of the most revered figures in Jewish, Christian, and Islamic traditions. In the ancient land of Egypt, the Israelites were enslaved for generations under Pharaoh's rule. But hope was not lost, for Moses emerged as a chosen leader, empowered by God's commandments. Through plagues and hardships, Moses confronted Pharaoh and led his people towards freedom. The Red Sea parted, allowing the Israelites to escape Egypt, embarking on a journey that would test their faith and resolve. For 40 years, Moses guided the Israelites through the wilderness, enduring trials and tribulations. Yet, despite their struggles, their faith in God remained unwavering. As Moses neared the end of his life, he appointed Joshua as his successor, a courageous and faithful warrior. Joshua stood ready to fulfill the promise of a land flowing with milk and honey. With unwavering faith, Joshua led the Israelites across the Jordan River, the final obstacle on their journey. The walls of Jericho fell, a testament to God's power and the deliverance of his people. The Israelites finally arrived in the Promised Land, a land brimming with abundance and blessings. They conquered their enemies, claiming victory after victory, with God by their side. The Israelites settled in the land, fulfilling God's promise to their ancestors. Under Joshua's leadership, they established a home, living in peace and harmony. The story of Moses' leadership and Joshua's journey teaches us the power of faith and obedience. May we learn from their example, trusting in God's guidance as we conquer the challenges that lie ahead. Moses' leadership. Moses, as we discussed earlier, led the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt through a series of miraculous events, including the 10 plagues and the parting of the Red Sea. Under his leadership, the Israelites journeyed through the wilderness, guided by a pillar of cloud during the day and a pillar of fire at night, both manifestations of God's presence. During their time in the wilderness, God provided for the Israelites by sending manna from heaven and water from a rock. Moses also received the 10 Commandments and other laws from God on Mount Sinai. He was the intermediary between God and the people, often interceding on their behalf when they sinned or rebelled against God. However, despite Moses' leadership and God's guidance, the Israelites frequently tested God's patience through their disobedience, complaints, and idolatry. This resulted in a generation of Israelites who were not permitted to enter the Promised Land due to their lack of faith and disobedience. Moses himself was also barred from entering the Promised Land, as we discussed earlier. Transition to Joshua. As Moses neared the end of his life, God instructed him to appoint Joshua as his successor. Joshua had been a faithful and capable leader among the Israelites, and he had served as Moses' assistant and military commander. Moses laid his hands on Joshua, symbolizing the transfer of leadership, and God affirmed Joshua's authority before the people. Entering the Promised Land. After Moses' death, Joshua assumed leadership and faced the monumental task of leading the Israelites into the Promised Land, Canaan. The first major challenge was crossing the Jordan River, which was in flood stage at the time. Just as God had parted the Red Sea for Moses, he stopped the flow of the Jordan River, allowing the Israelites to cross on dry ground. Once in Canaan, the Israelites faced various battles and challenges as they sought to conquer the land. The famous Battle of Jericho is one of the most well-known events during Joshua's leadership. God instructed Joshua to march around the walls of Jericho for 7 days, and on the 7th day, the walls miraculously collapsed, allowing the Israelites to capture the city. Under Joshua's leadership, the Israelites gradually conquered the land, claiming their inheritance as promised by God. Joshua divided the land among the 12 tribes of Israel, ensuring each received its rightful portion. Throughout this period, Joshua continued to emphasize the importance of following God's commands and serving Him faithfully. He famously declared, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord," Joshua 24:15, setting an example of devotion to God. Conclusion. The transition from Moses to Joshua marked a pivotal moment in the history of the Israelites. While Moses led them out of Egypt and through the wilderness, it was under Joshua's leadership that they finally entered and possessed the Promised Land. The story highlights themes of faith, obedience, and the fulfillment of God's promises to His people, emphasizing the importance of trusting in God's guidance and following His commandments. Top of form. Finally, after 40 years of wandering, the Hebrews reached the Promised Land. Through these extraordinary journeys, Joseph and Moses, two remarkable heroes, changed the course of history and inspired generations to come. Lessons from Joseph. Forgiveness and reconciliation. Joseph's story teaches us the power of forgiveness and reconciliation. Despite being betrayed and sold into slavery by his brothers, Joseph forgave them and was reconciled with his family. It reminds us of the importance of letting go of grudges and seeking reconciliation with those who have wronged us. Faith in difficult times. Joseph's unwavering faith in God sustained him through years of adversity and false accusations. His story illustrates the idea that even in the darkest moments of life, faith can provide hope and resilience. God's sovereignty. Joseph's rise from slavery to becoming the second in command of Egypt demonstrates that God is in control of all circumstances, even when things seem dire. He used Joseph's life to fulfill His greater plan. Lessons from Moses. Leadership and humility. Moses was a great leader, but he was also known for his humility. His story teaches us that effective leadership often comes from a place of humility, recognizing our limitations and relying on God's guidance. Obedience to God. Moses' life exemplifies the importance of obeying God's commands, even when they seem challenging or counterintuitive. His obedience in leading the Israelites out of Egypt and throughout their wilderness journey was crucial. Intercession and prayer. Moses frequently interceded on behalf of the Israelites, demonstrating the power of prayer and intercession for others. His example encourages us to pray for the well-being of others and seek God's mercy on their behalf. Lessons from Joshua. Courage and trust in God. Joshua's leadership in conquering the Promised Land highlights the importance of courage and trust in God's promises. Even in the face of formidable challenges, he relied on God's guidance and never wavered in his faith. Faithfulness and obedience to God's word. Joshua's commitment to following God's commands and teaching the Israelites to do the same underscores the significance of faithfulness and obedience to God's word. It reminds us that true success is found in aligning our lives with God's principles. Spiritual leadership. Joshua's declaration, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord," Joshua 24:15, serves as a powerful example of spiritual leadership within the family. It encourages us to prioritize and model faith in our households. Remembering God's faithfulness. Joshua often set up memorials and monuments to commemorate God's faithfulness and the significant events in Israel's history. This teaches us the importance of remembering and celebrating God's faithfulness in our own lives and communities. In summary, the lives of Joseph, Moses, and Joshua offer profound lessons about forgiveness, faith, leadership, obedience, and trust in God's sovereignty. These lessons continue to inspire and guide individuals in their faith journeys and daily lives. Here's an overview of the book of Exodus. 1. Slavery in Egypt. Exodus 1. The book begins with the Israelites living in Egypt, where they had become a numerous people. However, a new Pharaoh arose who enslaved the Israelites and imposed harsh labor upon them. Despite these hardships, the Israelite population continued to grow. 2. The birth and early life of Moses. Exodus 2. In this chapter, we learn about the birth of Moses, who was placed in a basket and set adrift on the Nile River to escape Pharaoh's decree to kill all Hebrew male infants. He was discovered by Pharaoh's daughter and raised in the Egyptian royal household. Later in life, Moses kills an Egyptian who was oppressing an Israelite and then flees to Midian. 3. God's call to Moses. Exodus 3-4. While in Midian, Moses encounters God in the burning bush on Mount Horeb. God calls Moses to return to Egypt and lead the Israelites out of slavery. Moses initially resists but eventually accepts the divine mission. He also receives instructions on how to perform miracles and signs to convince Pharaoh to let the Israelites go. 4. The 10 plagues. Exodus 7-12. Moses and his brother Aaron confront Pharaoh with God's demand to let the Israelites go. Pharaoh refuses, and God sends a series of 10 plagues upon Egypt, including turning the Nile into blood, a plague of frogs, gnats, flies, livestock disease, boils, hail, locusts, darkness, and finally, the death of the firstborn sons in Egypt. After the 10th plague, Pharaoh allows the Israelites to leave. 5. The Exodus, Exodus 12-13. The Israelites hastily prepare to leave Egypt, observing the Passover to commemorate God's deliverance. They are led by a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. As they depart, God instructs them to consecrate their firstborn and dedicate their lives to Him. 6. Crossing the Red Sea, Exodus 14. Pharaoh changes his mind and pursues the Israelites with his army. When the Israelites reach the Red Sea, God miraculously parts the waters, allowing them to cross on dry ground. The pursuing Egyptian army is drowned when the sea returns to its normal state. 7. The wilderness journey, Exodus 15-18. The Israelites continue their journey through the wilderness, facing various challenges, including a lack of food and water. God provides manna, bread from heaven, and water from a rock. They also encounter the Amalekites in battle. 8. The giving of the law, Exodus 19-20. The Israelites arrive at Mount Sinai, where God gives them the 10 Commandments and a set of laws and regulations. These laws cover various aspects of life, including morality, worship, and social justice. 9. The Tabernacle, Exodus 25-31. God provides detailed instructions for the construction of the tabernacle, a portable sanctuary where the Israelites would worship Him. It includes the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy of Holies. 10. The Golden Calf, Exodus 32. While Moses is on Mount Sinai receiving the law, the Israelites grow impatient and create a golden calf to worship. God is angered by this idolatry, but Moses intercedes on their behalf, and God forgives them. 11. The completion of the tabernacle, Exodus 35-40. The Israelites construct the tabernacle and all its furnishings according to God's instructions. God's presence fills the tabernacle, signifying His dwelling among His people. The book of Exodus is a narrative of liberation, covenant, and divine guidance. It lays the foundation for the Israelite nation and their relationship with God. It also contains important themes of faith, obedience, and the enduring presence of God with His people. Welcome to our channel, where we explore the captivating stories of the Bible. Today, we embark on an epic journey through the ancient tale known as the Book of Exodus. The story begins with a powerful Pharaoh ruling over Egypt, a land filled with wealth and prosperity. But as a new Pharaoh arises, the Hebrew people face oppression and slavery. Their cries for freedom reach the heavens, and a leader is chosen to guide them out of bondage. Moses, a humble Hebrew man, is called by God to confront Pharaoh and demand the release of his people. With divine interventions and miraculous plagues, the battle between Moses and Pharaoh becomes legendary. Finally, the moment arrives when the Hebrews are set free. But their journey is far from over. As they cross the Red Sea, a passage is miraculously opened, allowing them to escape the pursuing Egyptian army. In the wilderness, God provides for His people, raining bread from the heavens and instructing Moses to carve the 10 Commandments into stone tablets. These commandments will serve as a guiding light for generations to come. But the journey is not without its trials. The Hebrews doubt and question, longing for the comfort of their former lives. Yet, their faith is tested and strengthened through adversity. Finally, after 40 years of wandering, the Promised Land appears on the horizon. The journey of the Exodus reaches its culmination as Moses passes the mantle of leadership to Joshua, ready to lead the Hebrews into their long-awaited home. Join us as we delve deeper into the powerful lessons and timeless wisdom found within the Book of Exodus. Stay tuned for our upcoming videos, where we unravel more incredible stories from the pages of the Bible. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to stay updated on the latest biblical tales. Until next time.